I actually have a whole bunch of people who are really interested in this topic. They thought it was kind of fun. So I'm roughly having about like 10 artists who are willing to talk about it. It's sometimes when I do these interviews after we're done with the interview, that's when we talk about the business side and the struggles of, keeping it together. Um, some people I think are more equipped. It seems to me, I don't know you, but I think I act like I do know you. It seems like you don't have a problem keeping it together.
Ah, that's good. It means I'm a good actor. I come from a theater family, so I'm glad that I'm doing that. Maybe I'll get an Emmy for my acting. But no, it's I definitely have a great support system, which is number one. Um, Around me through my family, and specifically my wife, uh, that makes it a lot easier, and softens the blow. But there is something, that we weren't taught, no matter what, and it's still not, a part of the curriculum in a lot of universities and colleges, the business of music. You know,
Mhm.
it just doesn't. So you're sitting there practicing your skills, you're practicing everything you got to do, learning how to solo over Cherokee and 15 million keys. But then you sit down and you're like, well, wait a minute. Now, what does that mean? How do I get gigs? How do I maintain? You know, um, how do I invest? How do I get health insurance? We can go down the list. How do I move from an apartment to buying when uh, I've been self-employed and now getting a no doc loan to do anything is a pain in the butt. How do I maintain and still deal with my art? And that's something that we all struggle with, 90% of the time. But knowing that that is going to be a struggle and getting a hold on it early in your career is extremely important. I mean, it's different now as I get older. People have positions in universities or people are working for different institutions. That wasn't the case 30 years ago, when I started playing this music and got really into it. That wasn't really the case. It was like, go to New York, find a band, go on the road. But then with that, it was, we're talking at that point, you came home with a lump sum of money in your pocket. There wasn't, no one was wiring money. I didn't, my parents were great, but they filed their tax. My father was a full-time teacher. My mother was ran an after-school program. So they got together and they just did their taxes really quick. They didn't know about doing self-employed taxes, even though my father was a playwright, that was one part. He also was a teacher for 35 years. So it was easier.
Mhm.
So they didn't say, hey, make sure you write this down, make sure you keep these receipts, make sure you do all of those things. I had no idea about. And thankfully, a lot of that came from my wife, the support in figuring that out. How do you set those things up? The most important two on those are taxes and health insurance to me. How do you do that as a self-employed musician? How do you do that as self-employed anything?
Yeah. Yeah. We've had some interviews already where they're saying the system is rigged for people who are self-employed because everything makes it seems like you'd want to work for someone. It takes the burden off of you personally. And then when you are by yourself, it's all on you all the time, 24/7. And you may be strong in some areas, in some parts, you're like, I'll let this slide, and then you're screwed. And because you're like, oh, I shouldn't have let that slide. When I graduated in college in 1988, they put us all in a room the very last, like a week before we graduated. And they said, oh, by the way, about, 10% of you may get a job in the field. Like they were just saying, it's very hard to get into this business. It's very possible you will not. And I wish they would have told us that maybe in our our beginning classes so we could fight a little harder to be that 10%. But that was always a reality that you are in this business and it is a possibility. The I guess really the worst person is the person inside your head, where you have a little self doubt about keep on churning along and keeping this thing afloat. You've been around for over 35 years or so. Do you feel like you basically have all the club management on cue, that if you ever wanted to work, you would just set it up? Are you able to set up a tour by yourself and go across country? Is that something that you would do, or you would get someone else to do for you?
It is something I did for years by myself. I I literally didn't have a manager until 2010, other than my wife. Uh, and then that manager it moved and closed up shop and didn't manage anymore. But even when he was managing me, having a manager and not a booking agent is really pointless, because you want your manager, you misunderstand when you get into it. It's like, I need to get a manager. A manager just manages. And that's, I'm not saying they're not important, but that stuff you can do on your own. But a booking agent is who keeps you on the road and who keeps you out there and works well with the booking agent, and hopefully works well with your record label, which is another thing I never really had. I was on independent record labels. They didn't offer support. Never really had that. If the closest thing to support I've had is with Smoke Session Records, which I'm on now, or my own record label. So the quick answer to that is I did do that all on my own, for years, but I know there could have been it could have been much more, and I could have been touring much more if I had that support. But I came to New York at a time when, people were getting signed and getting a manager and getting a booking agent. At that time was Blue Note. I mean, I'm saying me, Robert Glasper, and Jason Moran all came to New York at the same time. But the difference is, one, I met a woman and had a baby and had to move back to Philly. So, and I don't, there's no regret, but that's a difference. And I didn't stay in New York to find that record label that was going to connect me with the booking agent, to connect me with the manager. So I did a lot of that on my own. And then after 2010, I got back to doing it. 2012, after that manager moved on, I did it all on my own again. And it wasn't until 2019 that I started working with Big Fish, booking agent that I work with now. And it wasn't until 3 weeks ago that I signed working with Gail Boyd as a manager. So 30 years, pretty much. I mean, I moved to New York in 1993. So in 30 years, it's been pretty much on me to learn how to maintain, keep myself out there, keep myself working, keep producing records, but then also take care of a family, 2 kids and a wife. So a lot of that was based, early on, it was when we were living in New York, it was really difficult because having a baby, an infant, and a 5-year-old, and then trying to deal with healthcare. I was paying for healthcare early on. Like, that was just on me, paying healthcare, trying to figure that out. Well, I say we were paying. But when I moved back to Philly, luckily there were jobs that my wife was able to get that included healthcare. So we've been blessed for that for the past 20 some years. But early on, I didn't know what I was going to do. And then I wasn't going to not have health insurance. So I was working just to pay health insurance early on, and still trying to stay on the road, still trying to stay present, and that's also without a publicist. These are all the things I didn't have any idea about. And you get mad, you look at the latest periodical, and you're like, where's my name? There's it's a machine. And much like you said earlier on this call, that it's rigged for the self-employed musician, it's also a certain amount of rigness. I like that word, rigness, to being an independent artist. I mean, when you're on the record label, you finish your record, and then the publicist and the radio rep get your record played on radio, and then also work with your booking agent to make sure there's press where you're playing at. It's a well-oiled machine.
Mhm.
which is a very important machine. But if you're independent artist and you don't have that manager and you don't have that booking agent, so okay, I'll skip over both of those and just hire a publicist, and I'll hire a radio rep. Hey, no one, unless they're a millionaire, is going to be able to do that for every single project on their own. And when you look at some of the artists who have started record labels on their own, they're piggybacking off of another major label, much like R&B and hip hop did. They're like, oh, this is a subsidiary of Universal, and now this is my label. So it's rigged in a way to really be an independent artist, but it's something that I didn't run away from, and something I won't run away from. I'm going to continue to keep doing it, because I don't want to do anything else, honestly. And if you figure out a way to make it work, it can work. It might not be the same model of some of the other people you see, but those sons I talked about are now 29 and 24 and contributing to this world in extremely positive ways. My 24-year-old has his own house, and my 29-year-old is living with his girlfriend, about to buy a house, and we're doing what we do, my wife and I. So it all works out. It's just a different path, and it's not as easy. And it is, like you said, getting your hustle on.
Yeah, yeah. You have you work with Sean Jones. He was like in your inner posse, but now he's doing exactly the exact same thing you're doing. So how do you rope in these people who are all scattered all over trying to do their gigs? And then I guess maybe as in a part two, like as we get older, we think of like, how do we rest? How do we say, I made it? And in my opinion, in the music world, if you work for a university and you become, part of that staff, that's the like I got it. So why haven't you like kind of went in that pursuit, or are you just still that lone wolf who are like, okay, well, I know that's available, but I really haven't dipped into that. So I did two questions in one. How do you keep your posse together when they're all scattered doing the exact same thing? And did you ever think about, looking at universities as a place to finally say, wait a minute, I now I can breathe a little?
Well, I'll go for the second part. I finally am at a university now. It just started this year in September. And I'm at Rutgers, which is it's funny. I'm at Rutgers University, where I went. I'm an alumni of Rutgers, where I studied with Kenny Barron, who's sitting right next to me right now. So it is a blessing to have that right now. The thing to do with that is not to get too comfortable, and continually still be in the street, because the street can't all be in the universities. It just can't, I met Gary Bartz. I didn't meet Kenny Barron at Rutgers. I met Kenny Barron at Sweet Basil. I met Gary Bartz actually I met Gary Bartz here in Philly. Eddie Henderson at Sweet Basil. Other people at the Visiones and other people at Village Gate. So being in the street and this music is part of it's a part of the street. We learned from, Hammy at Blewett and Patience Higgins and going up to Harlem. I learned so much from that part. So as I'm joining the ranks of like higher education and universities, I have to still make a point to be out in the street and to be present. And the second part of that is, and that's where posses come together, for lack of better words. You find people who are like mine, who are into the same thing. Sean, speaking of Sean, is a great educator, but also right there in the street and giving back to the people in Baltimore or wherever he is. When he was in Pittsburgh, same thing. When he was in Boston, same thing. Now he's in Baltimore. He's giving back at the same time. He's made the university the streets in a very good way. He's made himself accessible. And that's what I like. And that's the people I surround myself with. And if you do that, you create another network of people where you're like, hey, there's a great piano player down in Jersey, Orrin. See if you can get him at Rutgers. Hey, Sean, there's a killing bass player in Baltimore. He needs you. It's just like It's just like the jazz scene circuit, but in behind the walls of a school, and making sure that everybody's connected. But I didn't avoid teaching at a university. The universities avoided me. You know, I struggle with, you know, saying certain things because I don't want to sound bitter, because that's not what it is. But sometimes things need to be said. But it is a complete travesty, honestly, that I live in Philadelphia and have never been asked to teach at Temple University or University of the Arts. But I think, and that's something I've had to deal with in myself, so I didn't become bitter and angry about it. But sometimes I think the impression is, oh, Orrin's doing this, he has no interest in doing that. And then also sometimes, what do? The closest people to you treat like shit. That's the reality. So
They can handle it. Yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean? So I'm really thankful for Conrad Herwig inviting me to join the ranks of Rutgers University, a place that my father taught too. So it's a lot of history there. Not only did I go there, but it's a lot of history for me in New Brunswick and Rutgers University.
Yeah. You saw me like my next question is like, okay, so you're talking about a publicist and someone trying to get your records on the radio, but the as each year goes by, the jazz radio gets more fractured. There is not a continuity or a place for people to go. Some of these like Temple radio, which I was raised on, that was my thing, is half classical, half jazz, and then it becomes like an oldies thing where you're like, okay, where's the real music? Like, where's the music of today? And it doesn't exist on there. And the Newark radio station, loved it. Yeah, and then I'm like, where's the new stuff? Like, you really have to look at the who's on and where they're at to even get something that is kind of new. And I don't know, like City Winery seems to have like a churn for singer-songwriters, and they were able to run through the whole country, as a unit, and they save money on advertising because it's like kind of one thing. I don't know why we haven't created something similar to that for the jazz world, where people know this is where you need to go, this is what's going on. It just seems like someone with money needs to come in here and kind of create some kind of structure, because it feels fractured every year that I'm involved in it.
It's definitely fractured, but at the same time, it's changing in a positive way, and we have to get ready. And by getting ready, I mean we have to educate ourselves on how to be audiences. We need to educate the younger ones on how to be audiences. We need to get back to bringing our kids out to concerts, because we're creating a generation of people that can't sit still. And I'm not talking about, mental things. I'm talking more on, they're just not taught their attention span is to sit through a show or a poetry reading. We spent 2 years not doing that. So we got to really make sure we still teach that. And then on top of that, we also have to, and I'm doing this myself, we can't get as frustrated, because sometimes in our frustration, we miss change. Sometimes, what is that? Man plans and God laughs. There's one way of putting it. And sometimes it's like, don't miss your blessing. God tried to tell you something, you didn't listen. So what I mean by that is, there's been some major changes at WRTI in Philly. And in the last 2 years, it happened during the pandemic, with coming on of Josh Jackson. And I will be honest, I didn't listen to RTI for a long time, because I was like, it's not. But now I need to get over that, because I know him personally, and he's bringing some great music and musicians to the air. So we have to allow that to happen. And there's now Ars Nova in Philadelphia is just opening a venue. And we have to allow that to happen and then support it. So the new things are happening, but at the same time, we can't expect City Winery, this is where I struggle. And I know a bunch of musicians who play this music may be annoyed at what I'm going to say, but we can't get annoyed at the state of jazz when Keystone Corner isn't packed every night,
That's right.
or, Chris's in Philadelphia isn't packed every night. One of the worst things that happened during the pandemic, and I capitalized on it. I don't know capitalized, but I used it a lot. But one of the worst things that happened was streaming. And I look at it now, and because it's created a lazy generation. Streaming has become the best thing for introverts. Oh, I don't have to go out. I could just watch it on my laptop. Yeah, but we're the musicians on the bandstand, and we want to feel that energy in the audience. So I say all that to say things are changing, but in order for us to get back to art and limit the major hustle vibe, we need the audience to know how important it is for them to come out. It's important for you to buy those goofy CDs, and when nobody has a CD player, it's important, from the artist directly. All of those things are important to keep this industry thriving and continue.
That's interesting. Yeah. Andy Music House.
Andy,
we had Mike. They're definitely having a tough time right now. They're in a beautiful area. It's Charles Street, one of the better streets of the city of Baltimore, but it's riddled with potholes, gunshots, and graffiti. So you got an aging group of people who are just not willing to travel down there right now.
Exactly.
But you have Michael Formanak, who's playing, who's from Baltimore at one point, and he is flipping out that because I got the stream. Because I got the stream. I didn't get to see it, but he was flipping out how underwhelming, that people didn't go to see him perform, where this is where his roots are. So it's a really weird thing going on where I guess the one thing about this audience jump that we're talking about with the age group is that there's a lot of young people who are not considered jazz fans who are just on Spotify, and they're like, oh, I like this song. Oh, I like this song. Oh, I like this song. Like they're connecting together. They're creating playlists. They're going through like cool jazz lists and just clicking through them. Going like, oh, I like this one. I'm gonna save it. I'm gonna save it. There's more fans than not, and it's not tracked. Like there's more people who are really digging what's going on, especially in the European markets. They're way into what's going on, and they like this clash of jazz and modern going on. And it's out there, it exists, it's just not harnessed. You just have to know that it does exist out there.
Well, I think, and the other part of it, and I hope this makes sense, because we're in this digital age and we're downloading singles and we're creating, I wouldn't call those people fans, I would call them consumers. They're people who like the music. They're like, oh wow, this song sounds nice. But so they just have resolution, they didn't buy the whole Love Supreme. And then they're like, oh, what is that? That's Love Supreme. You just downloaded Resolution because you heard it on a TV show, but you didn't. And by the way, that's John Coltrane. Oh, who? Yeah. So we need to still continue to educate them. We're not creating vinyl collectors or music collectors. We're not doing that anymore because you download the little track on your phone or wherever, and then you're done with it. So we have to, even yesterday I was teaching and I played something and I was watching my student listen to it. And I was like, man, we got to teach how to listen again, and because he's listening and I could see he was like thinking about something else, ready to pick up his phone, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't that he didn't hear it, but he wasn't listening actively, like to gain a better understanding of the song or gain a better understanding of the artist. Everything is on surface level. That's because you do it real quick. I like that song. Boop, you're done. Like for me, you remember, definitely remember, you like that song. It took you a year to find the record. There were times where I waited for a tour to go to Japan, and even if the tour didn't pay that well, I took it because I could go to Japan and I would just buy a ton of records. And then there were stores you can go in and buy DVDs and buy a great bootleg concert of Stevie Wonder that now I can go right on YouTube and see. Yeah. So the accessibility of all this has changed, going back to your word, the hustle. Because the hustle now is like, how do I not only, before I had to tell you music was cool, come on out here. I mean, but now I got to tell you, music is cool, and watching live musicians is cool, and collecting the music is cool. It's a whole different thing with the accessibility that exists now.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great, I don't know. You just blew that whole thought process away. Not in a bad way. I mean, what I say exists and what you say exists, but you're 100% correct. You know, uh, I've been doing this show for 6 years, and somebody asked me what my favorite Miles Davis album was, and what came to my mind was Decoy. Yes, I know Decoy is not in the top 20 or 30.
I love
However,
Detroit.
okay, great, thanks. But the thing is that I paid for it with my own money. It was my first Miles Davis album that I bought. I played that to death. And so when I said to him, "Oh, well, I can't think of my favorite other," because I knew Decoy was the first thing that popped out of my mouth. But I was embarrassed because I knew he was like kind of a jazz guy, that he
Right.
would look down on me with Decoy. So, but
No,
it was the thing that, the connection between, what I was able to buy at Tower Records, and how proud I was because I was just a little kid, and I was like, this is my first Miles Davis album. I know who he is, and I listened to that thing, and I must have burned that thing out because as of now, it is kind of my favorite because it has all that history attached to it.
yeah, and that's the story, when you think about it, that's part of the music that doesn't exist. There's no story, that's not your favorite record because it's the best Miles Davis record. It's your favorite record. It's funny because I remember buying Decoy too. I remember buying the vinyl at Third Street Jazz here in Philly. But
Mm,
there's certain records that I'll never forget because I saved some money. I walked into the store, I purchased it, and it's not the same thing anymore when you just I just finished listening to a good friend of mine's record on Apple Music, and it was great. JD Allen, a great record. But now I'm like, I wish I would have bought it. Like and
yeah,
I did because I paid for Apple Music, but I wish I would have bought it, had it in my hand, read the liner notes. All of that experience is what's missing and changed our hustle,
yeah,
because it's like, do you pay somebody to write liner notes? Will they read them? Now you have to teach a whole generation how to read liner notes because they haven't read liner notes. You know what I mean? It's funny, because 30 years ago was the 90s and
yeah.
things have changed,
Well, that's what I told you. I saw you up at live at the World Cafe on Monday nights. I would work on purpose just to sit and watch you just like perform upstairs.
Uh,
And you know, now look at us talking.
yeah.
Yeah, things have changed, and things have changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Um, is there? I think we're kind of winding down on a piece where what would be one advice that you would give to like some new people, like or people who are starting out in the business, like you're now working with young minds. What do you see and say, hey, like other than learn how to do like uh remove other stuff out of your head and be available, like be there now.
Have a plan. Have a plan. That's the best advice. And be willing to change with your plan. But start off with a plan.
Mm,
Any business, anything you would do, if you wanted to borrow money to open a store or a cleaners or a bar or whatever, you'd have to have a business plan. You have to have a business plan. How are you going to succeed at doing this? And you should also have a business plan in order to be a musician. What are you going to do? Do you want to be an accompanist? Do you want to play in a pit band? Do you want to tour? Who do you want to play? Do you want to compose? Do you want to arrange? There's so many things you can do as a musician, but what is your plan and how are you going to do it? And then just like we all used to do with Atari, ColecoVision, I'm showing my age, Commodore and all of that, and all the way up to PlayStation, every once in a while it's okay to press the reset button and start over. Every once in a while. You don't want to get into a habit of doing that, but every once in a while it's like, you know what? I'm going to do this. I think this is what I should do. But you can't change up if you don't have a plan. So really just have a plan.
yeah. Now, do you feel that the colleges provide that blueprint, or is it like you got to really make connections quickly so you can with some seasoned people that they can kind of learn it?
as a college professor, I'll say this: most colleges, and the son of a 40-year college professor, and a graduate, my siblings and everyone, colleges provide one thing, and you have to seek out all the other things. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that colleges provide is debt.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what to do while you're there, they'll definitely give you some debt. You know, but while you're there, you have to see the moments, every other moment while you're there, you have to seize. You have to seek out information, that the information that exists on the campus and off the campus. But the only thing that colleges are required to provide is debt. They're not required to give you a degree. They're not required to give you anything. You know, you have to work for it.
Well, you know, this conversation is different than other conversations, because what you made me think of is back in the old days, they would do these jazz listenings where you drink the wine, you would listen in a room, then you'd talk about it. Now, I've tried to be friendly with some local people, Gregory Tompkins, and I would really secretly wanted to just go through his record collection. You know, I wanted to come to his house. Hey, how you doing? Let me look at your record collection. That's what we did. We played records to each other and say, this is hot. There would be hours that we'd be listening to music like Decoy, and no one said a word. We just were just chilling, like listening to music, reading the liner notes, getting excited about it. I am the Tower Record South Street guy. I was that freaky dude that was there like 5 nights a week, just trying to
me too,
like look through the records and talk to the strangers and say, this is hot, you got to get this, you got to get that. Or Sound and Market, 12th Street. I was there. I was like, what is new this week? I need to know what's going on. It's that level of excitement. It's a shame I can't share that with people now, because that music is my best friend. It will always be my best friend. But the things that I'm talking to right now made me love it, like love it. You know? Right.
Exactly.
Someday we'll turn people on. Maybe we'll do that. Create some listening. Maybe create some listening rooms, or you know, like vinyl days, and run around and get people excited about music again. And again, I think that what you're definitely saying, because we're going to wrap this up, is show up, bring your family. You know, there's like fill up these venues, and you know, just show that you appreciate this art form.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. Well, we wound that up. As always, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for doing this for me. It's called Do the Hustle. It's a series. I got Ches Smith come in. I got Frank McComb, who I expect to have a long conversation with, and some local guys. It's a fun thing. This came out really well. You don't mind if we put it on YouTube as is, face to face? All right.
Oh, no problem. Luckily, I actually had my haircut. So.
Yeah, I did take a shower the last time I did it. So we'll let it go live in today or tomorrow, and then this whole thing will run on February, March.
All right.
All right. Thanks again. Thanks for your help.
No problem.
All right. Bye-bye.